We'd only been dating a few months, so I really didn't know him all that well. I just knew that I didn't want my child to grow up fatherless, and he was offering to marry me. And it seemed like a solution, and he seemed nice. The first year and a half we were married, nothing violent went on. I had my first daughter, Rachel, and we lived with his parents at the time. When we first moved out of that home into our own place, that's when the violence started. And my first experience with it was we got into an argument, and Rachel was in her crib crying, and I went to go get her, and he threw a knife at my head and stuck it in the wall next to me and told me not to move. And I wasn't sure what to do. I'd never had something like that happen before. No one had ever treated me that way before. And he immediately went towards the baby. And he was talking all kind of crazy on the level of, I'm so sorry, I wish I was dead. I shouldn't have done that. I'll kill myself. And here he is fixing to pick up my infant child. And then when he's picking her up, he's saying things like, this world is too horrible for you to even live in. And I panicked immediately and came up behind him and started beating him on the back like this, put the baby down, because I was afraid he was going to do something to her and himself at that point. I had taken a pregnancy test earlier that week. I was 6 weeks pregnant. He elbowed me in the stomach and threw me down to the ground. And then he left into another room. I miscarried that baby the next day. To this day, he will tell people he doesn't know whether I was pregnant or not, if it was made up. It was devastating. And it was one of those things where he convinced me it was an accident. He didn't mean to, because I came up behind him. Of course, I don't believe that now. But we continued, and the cycle of violence from what I experienced with him was totally different in certain aspects to the cycle of violence that Ashleigh experienced. My ex would go months where things would be good. And he had a pattern of holidays. For some reason, holidays would set him off, and every holiday would become a battle. And he always liked to be the one who could tell everybody I put my hands on him first. So he was a big 6'1", 260-pound man. I, at the time, was a little bitty, itty bitty nothing. If I wore a size 1, maybe weighed 100 pounds. And he would get me cornered, and he would punch holes in the wall next to my head to intimidate me and scare me. And then I would be so frightened I'd have to shove him to try to get out of that corner, and the minute I put my hands on him, it was, you touched me first. And then it was on. You know, it would turn into a fight. And because I had the one child, and then, 2.5 years later, almost 3 years later, I had the other one. I had Ashleigh. After Ashleigh was born, it had reached a head where it was happening a lot more often. It was happening a couple times in a month instead of months being spread out. So we actually went to a family counselor, and the family counselor suggested that he have some testing, and they diagnosed him with being manic depressive with schizophrenic tendencies. And they offered him medication. Now, from that period of time, for about 2.5 years, when he took the medication, it was the best years of my marriage. He was golden. We were happy. The children were growing up in happiness. And that's the thing that sometimes can fool you, because on a moment's notice, he decided I didn't need my medication anymore. And he quit taking it. And it went from that bad situation to way worse. It went into like a hyper mode. And I kept thinking, I have to leave him, I have to leave him, but here I had these 2 little girls. And it was getting to where his anger would come out on them and I would get in between him, and then he'd beat on me. So I would take the beating so he wouldn't lay his hands on them. Finally, you know, the kids are getting older and I'm thinking, I just can't leave this man. If I leave this man and he takes them for a weekend, I can't protect them. So I went on in a marriage like that for 13 years until I just couldn't take anymore. And finally, my oldest daughter, who is the most loving person, most forgiving person in the world, is looking at me, 13 years old, going, Mom, you can't stay with Dad anymore. It's too much. You've got to quit. We'll be good. So I'm thinking, she's 13 and her sister's 10, and we separated and he moved in with his parents. So I thought, great, his parents will help be a buffer. And they were for a time period. But during our separation, he lost his job. He came over one day and the girls and I had planned a shopping trip. And he wanted to be involved in the shopping trip. And I was like, this is something special between the kids and I. You'd have to ask the kids. Well, Rachel's like, I guess, and Ashleigh's like, no. I don't want you in this house. I don't want you near me. I'm tired of watching you beat my mother. You need to go. And she was 10. And he got so mad that he was like, come here, I'm going to beat you. And she ran down the hall, and he chased after her. And I was like, oh, this is so bad. And she's trying to shut herself in the bathroom. And he pushed open the door and it crushed her between the wall and the door so hard that her head went through the wall. And then he grabbed a hold of her by the arms and he's shaking her and shaking her. And he starts shaking her like this. So he's bouncing her head between the toilet and the tub. And shaking her, saying, you take that back, you take that back. And I remember hitting his arms saying, let go, let go, let go. And her older sister crawled between his legs, wrapped her whole body around her head. And now he's slinging both of them from side to side. And he finally let go. And I told the girls to leave outside. And he's laying there crying he's going to kill himself. And I went, you know what? That's the first time in my life I didn't say don't. I said, if you're going to do it, you just do it. But don't do it here. Our marriage is over. And that was the end of our marriage. He did see the girls every other weekend, but after about a year of that, he tried to take off with them. He picked them up for summer vacation, and he was not coming back, and I had to call the police. And they brought the girls back. His father actually helped me get the children back, so he wouldn't go to prison. But from that moment on, the girls were like, I will never go with you again. I will never trust you again. You can't make me go. And he gave up pretty quickly after that. But for me, that's a key, because with Ashleigh was such a strong-willed, vivacious, spirited kid who saw this all, and she experienced this incident, that you would not pick her to be the girl who would pick an abusive relationship. But she did. And I know the reason why. She was looking for someone to give her that love that he did not give her. She was looking for something to heal that moment in that bathroom. And it didn't happen. She ended up in her dating relationships just going from one boy to another. And the thing is that the more she dated somebody, you know, different guys, the lower her self-esteem was getting. And she couldn't understand why she couldn't find somebody just love her for her. And that's when she hit that very low point that she was just primed for someone like Joshua Mahaffey. He came in, 9 years older than her, she's 20, and going, I'll love you for everything you are, the good, the bad. I don't care if you lie to me. I don't care what you do. I'm here for you. And she thought that was just wonderful. Found this dream guy. I think the best description my mother ever came up with was that Joshua Mahaffey was my ex on steroids. Because everything was so moving so fast with her. 1 month after knowing him, he wants her to move in with him. 2 months after that, you know, he's got her so wrapped up that he's controlling her phone, he's controlling her job. She quit her job because he wanted her to quit the job. He wasn't working. Nobody was supporting them except for he moved in a roommate, and he was working. So he was putting all the money into the place. And Ashleigh was, you know, the kid who called me every day. And we'd go, hey, Mom, you know, this is what happened to me today. And all of a sudden, those phone calls stopped, and then we were paying for the phone. And the phones would start breaking. I need a new phone. This phone broke. 1 week later, this phone disappeared. You know, a few weeks later, this phone broke. And her father and I, her stepfather technically, but when we were married, he took all my kids as his own, and they took him as their daddy. Nobody will tell my daughters that's not their daddy. They had a very special relationship, and he picked up where the other man should have been, what he should have been. But Ashleigh was, you know, we weren't getting a hold of her as eagerly, and he moved her an hour and a half away. And we were starting to suspect things. And then 3 months into their dating relationship, he asked her to marry him. We knew something was kind of going on, but we didn't know the dynamics of it, so we were like, great. And shortly, like 3 days after they got engaged, she calls me from a friend's house, crying and screaming, saying, Josh put a cigarette out in her face. And she has locked herself in the bathroom. And I'm trying to get out of her where she is. And here's Josh calling me the same time she's talking to me. And so I told her, let me talk to Josh. And he is all, I flicked the cigarette at her. It was an accident. And I just need her to come out of the bathroom and understand. And I said, well, that's fine, but I want Ashleigh to call me back and tell me everything's okay. I'm going to talk to Ashleigh first. Ashleigh did call me back and said everything was okay. It was all a lie. He ended up, after he forced her to do that with friends there, taking her head and putting it through the wall, completely through the wall of that bathroom. And the other friends who were there, like I said, there was a group of about 7 of them, didn't know what to do. And one of them tried to call 911, and he broke all their phones. He took them all up, and he broke them, so they couldn't call 911. And then he started that. He took a penknife off the counter and started stabbing himself, saying he was going to kill himself. So nobody would call the cops. They were all too frightened. And when he left with Ashleigh, then a friend finally called the police, but she didn't know where their address was, so the police couldn't go check on them. And that's the cycle that Ashleigh was in for months until she became pregnant. When she got pregnant, she decided to leave. And she came home once, but he came directly over that night with his friend, his roommate, and they were beating on my door. I had to call the police. And if my dogs wouldn't have been unchained that day, I think they would have got in our house and hurt us that night. But our dogs attacked them. And the police finally came out, and he took off, and they didn't catch him. But Ashleigh was in that mode like I was, of she wanted her baby to have a father, and she wasn't caring what was going on at that point. And he was promising that his problem was he had got a head injury when he was 18 years old, and he had seizures. And he was saying he didn't remember beating her. It was all medical. And he suckered her back home. He suckered her back into going back home. She was gone for 2 weeks before we got a phone call from him saying she was missing. We spent a whole week looking for our daughter. Before she was found, she had taken off to some friend's house. And we thought, great. And I had to see her to be sure she was okay. When we met her, she had a black eye, and she had bruising across her wrists, and she had a bruise on the side of her stomach. And I asked her what happened, and she just said, Josh threw me down and kicked me. She didn't give me details until later. It was much broader than that. She wanted to leave, and he ripped her clothes off in the street so she couldn't leave. And he drug her back in the house, and he hit her in the face, and he grabbed her by the hair and threw her into a wall, and he kicked her in the stomach and told her she couldn't leave with the baby. And then he tied her up in a bed and left her there a whole day. And he wouldn't untie her until she agreed to have sex. So, in my opinion, that's rape. She said she had to do it in order to get untied to get away. And then when he left work that next morning, she left him. And she left a note, and she said, I figured from that note you would figure out, I would contact you. I figured he'd read that to you. And you'd get, I left him, I'm just on the down low, Mom, I'm okay kind of thing. He didn't tell the police he wrote a note. He lied about the note. The note did resurface later at a neighbor's house because she left it over there. So he totally lied about those kind of things. So he's making us believe our daughter is, just run away or maybe dead. He even said she may be dead in the lake. You want to come over and look in the lake? And I thought, oh my God, he has killed her at that point. So I was just happy to see her. And she filed a police report, and they filed felony assault charges on him. She wouldn't come home. She said, he made it clear, if I came home, he would kill you and kill my sister. I can't come home. And the police in that county gave her very bad advice and said, well, if you stay here in the county, it'll make it easier for us to catch him. She didn't realize at that time he had 2.5-year-old warrants for beating a second wife and warrants for beating his sister-in-law, and they hadn't caught him yet. So she started hopping from friend to friend within that county, trying to stay within that county. Found a job real close to where she was living in some little hole-in-the-wall place, thinking she could keep on the down low and earn some money for her and her baby. He found her. And we couldn't figure out how he was finding her, because he was finding her phone number first. We changed that phone number 3 times, and he kept finding that phone number. And we know that he found her by, she kept having to renew an emergency protective order that she took out every 20 days because they couldn't serve him. She had to keep going up there to the courthouse and renew it. Well, he had a friend follow her from the courthouse to where she was staying, and that's how he found her. So he started calling and harassing her at work. He harassed her friends. She's still trying to go from place to place and keep him off balance, but he's calling her, telling her what she's wearing at work. He's starting to kill everyone at work. And police reports are being made, and police reports are being made, and this is the last week and a half of her life. And the police added harassment, they added violent acts, they added all these charges, but they still weren't picking him up. They could not get him. She had gotten to the point she was so scared that, she was already working with Anna at the crisis center at that time, through that whole time. And we contacted Anna, and they helped contact the shelter in Sherman, Texas to get her out of Oklahoma and hide her. And the DA's office out of Ardmore had an advocate who contacted her also, and so we're all arranging it. And we worked that plan out on a Thursday, day before she died. And her thing was, these people here where I work were so good to me, I can't leave them high and dry today. I'm gonna finish my work week till Saturday. And then I'll go. The minute I get off work Saturday, I will go. And we said, okay. That's just too late. It was too late. He found her that Friday. It was July 13th, Friday the 13th, the unluckiest day of my life. The unluckiest day of hers as well. The roommate who was living with him, who was helping him stalk her, harass her, create fake Facebook accounts to help find her. He killed his mother's ex-boyfriend and stole his car and his money so he could drive 3 hours to pick up Ashleigh's ex. They drove 3 hours back into Oklahoma, met Mahaffey's mother who saw the bloody car, bought them beer and cigarettes and gasoline, and sent them on their way, knowing the police were looking for him, knowing that they had killed this other man. And they went looking for Ashleigh. And the first place they stopped was the courthouse because they thought she would be renewing her protective order that day. It was actually the day before. He messed up on that day. The police said between the text, he was looking to kill me and Ashleigh at the courthouse, but we weren't there. So they went next to her work. Well, she was 15 minutes away from being at work that day. She wasn't there yet. So they walked out. Then they went to where the house was that she was staying, and Mahaffey broke in through the front door, and Josh Scott broke in through the back door so she couldn't escape. And there were 3 other people in the house. Ashleigh ran for the bathroom and shut herself in. He broke down that door and he shot her twice because she struggled with him. He shot her in the shoulder the first time. He shot her in the head the second time. Then he turned the gun on himself and he killed himself. Joshua Scott held the other 3 people in the house hostage. And he attempted to get the gun. But Mahaffey had landed on our daughter in this narrow bathroom so that the gun was pinned between him and her. Otherwise, I believe the other people in the house would have been killed as well, because that was the plan. Instead, he hung around while Ashleigh was still alive, and he wouldn't allow them to call for help, and he bummed a cigarette. One of the young ladies, Ashleigh's best friend, escaped next door to where her mother's house was and was able to call the police. And he didn't leave until he heard the sirens. He was just sitting there smoking a cigarette. And finally he took off. They careflighted my daughter down to Plano, and she died 10 hours later. They tried to keep her alive for the sake of the baby. We had doctors saying they might be able to keep her alive for the sake of the baby. When it became apparent that wasn't going to happen, we had literally 50 family members there at the hospital, and they allowed them to come in 2 by 2 to say their goodbyes. And my daughter did not look like this image you see here. I did not recognize her. The amount of blood was unreal. I will never forget it. Every time they changed the bandage over her head, the blood on the walls. I will never forget that image. I will never forget the image of having to watch through a sonogram my grandchild die, her last heartbeat. It's something that runs through you. You never forget it. The last thing that I will never forget is looking for a spot just to touch her and kiss her that wasn't covered in her own blood or his blood to say goodbye. And I had to tell her at that moment it was okay to go. They had already declared her brain dead. They were going to take her off machines. I just told her it was okay to go. She was holding on for the baby. The baby was gone. She could go with her baby. And she left within like 15 seconds. Her heart stopped. And she left. And this is the thing, you know, I am a survivor. And it's hard for people to gauge when you're a survivor feeling like a failure as a parent. I did everything I could. She did everything she could. She did everything by the book. Everything her advocates were telling her, the police were telling her, and she still ended up dead. Where did I fail? And it just boils down to, I did not fail. It boils down to that one person making that choice. He took it out of my hands. And it's his fault. No one else's. We went home, and that was the longest ride home from the hospital I have ever had. It was 107 degrees that day. It was still like 100 degrees out at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the quiet in the car is deafening, that kind of quiet. About an hour into our ride home, I looked over at my husband and I said, you know something, the devil made a mistake tonight. And he looked at me like I was losing my mind. I said, no, I'm serious, because I will never be quiet. I will never be silent again. This is the moment that changes everything inside of me. And it did. It sent me from quietly surviving what I've been through into this roaring mother advocate who will not stand by and watch it happen to another child. And I won't put up with another mother having to grieve the way we grieve. It's horrible. People expect you to get over it. You don't get over it. I tell people, you know, what my ex did to me, he scarred me. I can live with a scar. And I'm proud of my scar. But losing her was like if somebody cut off my arm. I'm learning to use the other arm, but I will never be the same again. Never be the same again. And I tell people all the time, I didn't expect to, you know, jump in the way I did as fast as I did. I feel Ashleigh and God put me there. Because 1 month after she had died, I decided to start going to my own church on Monday mornings with nobody there, and I got before the altar and just prayed to God. I decided that was my counseling session. And I let him have it all. I yelled sometimes, I cried a lot. And I decided that day, I said, if you give me justice for this baby and for my daughter, you know, I have to have it. I have to have it to go on. So I dedicated every Monday to prayer and fasting through the trial for the other young man. He got 3 counts of first-degree murder, life without parole, run consecutively. He'll never get out. But I spent that whole time just on the ground, and that first time I was there, I said, whatever Ashleigh's purpose was, whatever this baby's purpose was in life, you just give it to me and I'm going to do it. And I had no clue what I was asking for. If you ever pray a prayer like that, be prepared. Because that night I went home and had this dream that I was speaking before a group of people. And when I walked off the stage, there was Ashleigh. And she was just glowing, and she was so angelic. I can't even explain it. But she hugged me and she said, this is what I want you to do. And the next day I got a phone call from somebody going, I know it's only been a month, but would you consider speaking? And I went, there's your sign. You know, I told God I'd do this, so now this is what I do. So I speak before different groups at Vigils. I speak before different groups, you know, individual counseling stuff, anger management classes.
College campuses.
Yes, everywhere. I've done nurses, first responder training. And Ashleigh's story got so big, it got out of proportion. I didn't even know where I was going with it. I felt like I was just being dragged around because, you know, it went national, it went to Cosmopolitan magazine, it went to Britain, it went to Australia. And I had no clue why all of this except for God. But the response I would get whenever I'd ask somebody about her story, why pick the people in Australia, I said, why are you picking her story? Surely there are people in Australia that you could use. And they said the thing is with Ashleigh's story is it hits all bases for every victim. What little bit they may have experienced, she had that. You know, she experienced the rape, she experienced the intimidation, the, you know, being held hostage, the violence, the being pregnant even. They say that, you know, her story picks up where somebody can relate to one aspect of it in some way. And I think that's the big thing, because Ashleigh was larger than life, alive. She walked into the room and she was like a fireworks show. And you ooh and ah, and just like you would want more every minute of the day of her. You know, I love telling different stories of her. Like from the age of 2, she had this thing about coming out of the tub or swimming, and she wanted to hug me while she was all wet. You know, and she would chase me, and I'd let her chase me, acting like it was so. But she thought that was the greatest thing, and I loved that about her. You know, she carried that on. She was the kid who would walk down the school hallway and go, I don't know you, but you look like you need a hug. Hi, I'm Ashleigh. And hug you. You know, I had so many of her friends contact me and tell me that after she died. The way I met Ashleigh was she just came up and said, hey, you need a hug. Let me hug you. You know? And that's my kid. And I think by doing this, I'm kind of relaying that hug out there everywhere to all the people who are like her that need that hug. Because you get so stripped of your self-esteem and your value and your worth when you're in that kind of a thing, when you're in that struggle to find yourself after someone has put you down for so long. I feel like this is her way of just kind of hugging everyone and presenting the hope she felt in life about everything, and the wonder and the amazement of it all. I have to keep things in perspective. This last anniversary, my husband looked at me and I told him, I said, you know, I know this is the day we lost Ashleigh, but it's also, you know, the worst day of our lives was the best day of her life. She got to see Jesus. Best moment of her life. How can I be unhappy? Well, I'm unhappy because she's not here. You know, but that's not the way she is now. And I want everybody to experience that happiness here. I don't want it to have to end the way hers ended. She would want that in life. So, is there anything you'd like to add? I'm talking to him.
The only thing I can add to that is these guys, the men that abuse women, they're cowards. They're without a doubt a coward. These 2 gentlemen, neither one would show up at my house when I was there. I'm a truck driver, I'm on the roads all the time. For the last week, I was chasing them, trying to find them before they could get to her. These men would hide, they would run, they would do anything they could to keep from a confrontation with another man, and it wouldn't have mattered if it was me or a friend of ours, Patrick, that's not any bigger than my wife. If it was another man, they were scared. They act against women because it's the only way in their lives they feel empowered. And if you strip them of that, they'll kill themselves. And he proved it. Because when Ashleigh wouldn't put up with it anymore, yeah, he killed her. but he couldn't handle himself, not even being able to manipulate and overpower a woman and make her do what he was saying. So the only thing I can add to what you've said is God bless every woman that has ever been through a situation like that. Y'all are the most powerful, bravest people I've ever imagined meeting. And I've never met a man in my life that had as much courage as the ladies that have been through these type situations. I'm even scared talking in front of y'all. Go ahead, lady.
But, you know, like I said, I'm, if anybody needs me for any kind of, to help speak to somebody, or we have a website. Her story is on the website, so feel more than welcome to take materials and use them. You know, show Women in Crisis the website. I get so many contacts from across the country, and when I get them, I usually go, okay, here's your local area. I help them find it, and I send them into that line of communication. But there's Ashleigh's story is a lot of times a catalyst that makes them go, yes, I have to go. So, and that's okay with us. You know, that's the best part of what we do. So, and thank you. If you have any questions, anybody have any questions? If not, come up and talk to me afterwards. I will be here. So, thank you.